Good evening everybody and welcome back to day 27 of 100 days of code with Lilly Code. So let's get into this today. We are looking at this auth context that we've created, which is just here, and what this is a React create context. So yeah, we're just figuring out what this is all about and implementing it. So let's continue and get a bit more understanding around this. So all we've done so far is we've created this component. This is the component and it's called the auth context, and all it is using this React create context, and which is tracking the state of something. So let's just keep going and find out a bit more about this. So here in our navigation we've used it as a consumer, and in our app we've used it as a provider. So we have a consumer and a provider. So I'm going to just keep watching the video as always and continue to code and let you know what I'm doing as I go. So time to watch the video. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is, in this auth context provider, we've passed in the is logged in value, but we can also, we can also pass in a second value on logout. So we'll do that as well. And as I gain more understanding, I will communicate it to you as I'm just figuring this out myself here. So we will learn and grow together, guys. That's the excitement of all this. So as I learn, you do too. So here we're going to call the logout handler, and logout handler, just like that. Oh yes, okay. So now we have our logout handler being passed in. Should have a closing tag, so we'll just check down below. So there's our closing tag. React fragment, and this should be closing that. So for the moment I won't worry about that because something else seems to be wrong. So over here in our auth context, in the consumer of our auth context, so this is the provider, and what we have provided is this value object. Am I missing a bracket, or do I have one too many? That's what it was. So I was just missing a bracket. So we declare our open curly parentheses, and then we pass in the object that we want to provide. So what we're passing in is logged in, which is our is logged in switch on and off, yes or no, are we logged in? And then also our on logout, which is the logout handler, which actually is the thing that logs us out, more like the function or the logout handler, the thing that handles the logout. So now over in our navigation we can use both of these things. So CTX, or our context, I'm just going to call this context because, you know, I don't want to be getting confused and calling it something else. This is our context. So our CTX is our context, and then here I just need to mirror that. So first of all, we had this called as CTX, which was just a name we gave it for this incoming data for the context coming in. So I'll just rename this to a better name for myself so I know what's going on here. So this is going to be context, and therefore we need to change the name down below because we can see that we were still trying to use our CTX. So then we'll copy this and just replace these areas where we've called it CTX because we've changed the name of that thing, so that's okay. And then also we were getting our on logout from our props being passed in, but we've also passed it in not just from our props now, but from our context. So we're going to use our context instead here and get it from that particular way instead, from our context which we've passed in from our provider. So if we save that now, use context is not defined on line 7 of navigation.js. So here we have use context, and we have not defined that. So just let me wait and see, because that looks like I need more information there. Like I shouldn't just have use context and then this, I don't think. But let's see where use context comes from. I feel like that line should be more, but we'll figure that out now in a moment. So if we go back to our app.js, okay, so I think use context is going to come in from React. So we're just figuring this out here, and then just let me check my auth context. Or does it come from our actual declaration of our auth context here? So one moment, and I just figure out what's going on with that. So we clearly need to import something. We've just declared something here and we're using it, but we need to add more information. We need to tell it where this use context is coming from, and at the moment I haven't done that. So I'm just going to see what I was supposed to do there, because I'm not actually sure. So let's figure it out. Okay. Cool. So let's see. I'm just watching the video of figuring this out. Hope you all had a lovely Friday and are having a nice Saturday. It is Saturday and I'm in Ireland, and yeah, I hope that your Saturday is going well and you have a lovely Sunday and a lovely week and a lovely life. So yeah, why not throw it all in there? That's what we're here for, isn't it? So this is taking a while to load, but that's okay, because we've got all the time in the world. We're here to learn. We'll just hang around for a moment. So I'll Google this in the meantime and just try and figure it out myself. So use context. What are we missing there? React API context. Here we go. So the React documentation is very, very good. So okay, he's literally just at the point. I think I skipped a video by accident. Oh. Okay, yeah, so I just missed something here. So this, I knew that this looked like an incomplete line, like that just doesn't look finished. So what I should have actually done was declared this as a constant, given it a name. So this is going to be context, because that's what we've decided to call it down below. And then we want to use context, and the context we want to use is the auth context, which is what we declared in our own file, which is here. So now we've properly set that up, like how we're supposed to use that. So that should solve the problem that we were seeing. So no, we still have an issue. Let's just reload to be sure, because a lot of the time reloading can actually fix your problem, but it didn't in this case, so that's okay. We're going to just continue in the file where we have an issue, which is our navigation, and figure out what's going on. I'll just close everything else, because let's keep it nice and clean, and add my semicolon. And is this spelled the same way as it is down here? Because I don't know why that's, not, you can see the difference in highlighting in this particular piece of text and over here, and also in the props. So this dulled out color is telling us that there you go, if we hover over it we can see what's going on there. So props is declared, but its value is never read, so we're not using props anymore, and that's okay. We know that, because rather than getting that information in from our props, we've now got it from our context, which is the first thing I did when we first start watching this video. Remember, I changed these down here. I changed this from props to context because we're getting it from a different place. We're now passing in the onLogout with the context as opposed to using it from the props, So that's the only reason that that one's gone grey, like a darker, a different shade, an unused shade. But why this one is, because we should be using that right here. So we'll continue to figure this out and see what the story is. Okay, so literally we're in our navigation. So why does his file look totally different to mine? What have I done? So Max doesn't have this Auth Context consumer here. He just has this nav. So I'll just keep watching for a moment and figure this out. So let's do that. Have a stretch while we're at it, you know, sitting at a desk, gotta move your body. Okay, great. So why is that there? Right. Okay. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to go back further because I've sort of lost where I'm at a little bit. And just figure out what's going on here. So, yeah, let's do that. Me and my dad went on a little cross-country trip yesterday. It was great. We had a great time. It's just seen as I told you about it yesterday, I'll tell you I had a great time today. And yeah. Okay, so we did that. I'm just going through this video. Do you know what, I'll pause it for a moment just to figure out where I'm at, so I'm not wasting your time with all this. And then as soon as I know where I'm at, I'll unpause and continue, okay? Okay, so I figured out where we are again, and yes, I also figured out why we're doing this again. I sort of lost sight of that. So the whole reason we're doing this to begin with is when you're trying to pass data from a component to another component, in React you can use props, which allows you to pass data from a parent to a child. So components that are linked, do you know what I mean? A component that has a component within it, you can pass data into that component. Whereas if you want to pass data like the isLoggedIn property to some complete other component that isn't directly under the same tree structure as the component you're trying to send the information from, you have to pass it up all the levels and then over, or use context where you can just send it wherever you want. So that's why we're doing this use context. It is replacing the props, and it's replacing it because we can pass it sort of more freely. So that's in the case where you would use context, and that's why we're doing this now. So, and I've also figured out where we're at, and we're going to just keep on going here. So that's good. Okay, so we are back. I had some internet issues and I'm delighted to say I figured them out. It took me about an hour, but we're back online, and I also know where we're at in the code, so that is super duper. Let's continue. Great. Okay, actually delighted. So what we did here was Max did change the setup of this, so that's super. So we're now exploring the use context by creating a constant called context. So this part should be removed, and I just hadn't done that yet, and therefore it was leading to some confusion. So let's continue. So I'll just remove this because we're doing it through the constant, so they both shouldn't have been there. Cool. And we will cool. So now we're going to use the use context hook And this should indeed be imported from React, which was a concern of mine earlier on. So we figured that out as well. I just skipped like a few minutes of the video and it was leading to confusion. So we're in the money now. Great, so now it actually works again. So we were just missing a few things. We had not properly used this context. So rather than doing it the way we had previously done it down in our return statement, we've extracted that out up here and we're using the context, auth context, which is the component we created. And in order to use this context, we also need to import that from React because it's a React thing. And we've just called this context, and then with this constant we can then use that down below, and this is how we're going to access the data that we're passing around our components. So that's great, we figured that much out. And I'll keep on listening. Yep, so now we want to pass in our on logout also. There should be a small L. And is that where that should do that? I presume we do need that there, but where he's actually put it, I presume we need it there as well, but where he's putting it right now is in the app.js, so let's just follow what he's doing. And I think I already have it here because this is where I started and just missed a second or two of the video. Navigation. So now in our navigation here we want to use our context, which we're doing, so that's okay. Cool. So we can log in and we can log out, which is what we want, and we've passed this functionality from our use context as opposed to props. So we don't need props anymore. And we've implemented this using context instead. So I'm just going to commit my changes so far, because we've made some progress here. So git add everything. Dot is just for everything. So that's going to add all the new changes. So if we do git status, we can see those changes that we've just made. So here we can see we've created a new file, which is that's just a automatically created file in our node modules. So they're just node modules files, that's fine from doing npm install. And then we've changed our navigation and our app file, and we should also have that new file, Auth Context, or perhaps that was in a previous commit. So okay, and I'll also just commit now and pass a message, and my message is going to be use context used to pass login information, login state, and git push. So now we are updating this auth context, and we are going to update this second property, and it's on logout. But what we want to do is define just an empty function to tell it it's there, but we're not telling it what to do just yet. So that's how we do that. And then in our navigation, on our button, we should have on logout, and that's there, that's fine. And I don't have my microphone plugged in, so sorry. I was up and down all around trying to get the internet working, so apologies guys. And I thought I lost my video as well, so I ain't starting again. It's been gonna just continue. Okay, so now in our auth context.js, what we want to do is create a provider, and this is going to accept props. We're just defining the function here. It's an arrow function, and we want to return our auth context dot provider, and we want to pass that props. Yup. So props dot children, and add a semicolon, and then we've exported our default, so that's okay. But we also want to export this. And by exporting this auth context provider, we can also use state now. So we'll do that. We're going to implement use state in here as well. So use state, and then down in our auth context provider, we want to use that state and track the state of an item. So const So what we're doing is we're moving this functionality, everything, into this component now, because it just makes more sense. We can pass all those things in here. So we're just setting it up to do that. False. And then we have our const logout handler, and it's just going to be our arrow function. Bada bing, bada boom. That should be an arrow. And now we can use this. So set is logged in to false on logout. And then we want to just declare our login handler as well. So const login handler. Again, an arrow function. And here we just want to set is logged into true. Awesome. looking at our value. So our value, we'll bring this down. So our value is going to be an object that we're passing in, and this is going to be is logged in, which is our is logged in state. And we have on log out, which is just our logout handler, which points to our logout handler, and then our on log in, which points to our login handler. Okay. And then up in our default, we can just update the default to contain these same values. And then I'll just move this down here for ease of reading. And this is where this is being closed. No, actually back here. So now we can just see what's going on there a little bit easier. I think all this should come back one. Yeah. And then we will just update this to have our on login as well, which again is just an arrow function, an empty arrow function. So there we go. But we actually want an email and a password here on login. Yeah, so previously we had other stuff happening when we were logging in. So we also set our item or removed our item. So we'll continue to do that with our logout handler in our auth context. So in our logout handler, first of all, we want to remove the is logged in from the local storage, and then here we want to set it for the login. So same as what we were doing before, we're just putting it all over into our auth component to keep it all together now. So okay, and and we also want to bring over a use effect code, which is here. So we'll copy this and paste this up here. Yeah. And we just need to import this. Okay. So then we can update our app components to take out all this information and just clean this up. So we can do that. So we don't need our login or our logout handler in here anymore, because we're doing all of that in our auth context. And we also don't need this import anymore, nor do we need this constant. I'm just going to make sure, but I'm sure we also don't need that. We have that. Yeah. Okay, and we also remove our auth context here, because we're not doing it like that anymore. So I will just put this back for visual. So, okay, that's self-closing. Okay, sorry, I just need to crack my back. So So we just didn't need that import either, because and then we also don't need to be passing in a is authenticated here. So we just have our main header for the time being, and then hold up. So I just wanted to make sure and slow down because he was speaking so quickly. I don't want to miss something here, so still just watching. And then instead in our index.js, what we're going to do is wrap the app component in our auth context provider to give it back this functionality. So context provider, and this is going to wrap our app. Okay. Okay, yeah, so then back in our app.js, we were previously getting our is logged in a different way. So what we want to do now is use our context to get that information. So we'll just import use context. Oh, what? No. Oh no. Okay, use context. Cool. So now we can declare a variable in order to get this. So const context equals our use context from our auth context, and now we're going to use this instead. So down here we're going to say, if we don't have it in the context, or if we do have it in the coming from the context, these two properties which represent the state, and then we also do not need to pass it in like this because we just have our components now because we're doing it through use context instead. So okay, so now in our home component, we are going to use this context as well, and same as in our login. So in home here, we're going to use context, import it so we can use it, which is just this data that we're passing around, our login and logged out states. So we declare a constant again, same as what we've been doing, and we'll call this one auth context just for a bit more separation, just so we know that this is, you know, the context coming in here. You could call it whatever you want, and this is going to be equal to use context auth context. So So use context auth, oh, in brackets, auth context, yep, and semicolon. And that's imported it for us. And then we can actually use this and do this in the login as well, because those are the two components that we were doing this with. So back in our login we can do the same thing and use context as well as all these other hooks. Use context, yep, and declare a constant. So we will do that, yes, down here or even below. Genie Macarini, this, what's going on there? Login. Okay, yeah, okay. So let's just make sure I'm adding this in the right place. Okay, yeah. So in our component function, so yes, in here, now he just went past, yeah, he did it here. So we're within our component declaration for this component, and now we're going to use it. While I was getting the internet fixed, I also ate 2 ice creams. And I feel so full of ice cream. So const auth context. Too many ice creams. Okay. So this is going to be US context and auth context. Oh, I banged my tooth with my water bottle and it actually hurts context slightly. Ah, sure, look, it doesn't hurt. Can't be moaning like that, can we? Really? Little bump and you're going to start moaning about it? Oh, no. Yeah, it doesn't hurt anymore when I realise how silly that sounded. So now we move down and we're going to use this down below where we've first called out props. So let's wrap our text. So this is in our submit handler. So here, instead of props, we have auth context. Excuse me. Auth context on login. So just listening, he's just saying that generally this separation of concerns is good, you know. So keeping our app.js a bit more focused on what we're doing, this can be better, and having all the auth context stored in this one file and tracking everything in here, that this is a good separation of concerns, and these are just good patterns to follow as a React developer, basically. So we have some issues. So on app.js on line 8, use context is not defined. Aha, because I didn't spell it right. So cool, we just change that to an X and save. And we have another issue. Auth context is not defined. So we need to import this also. So this is going to be imported from import auth context. There we go. So now those two errors should go away. And we still have one more. Logout handler is not defined. So no, it went away on reload. So now I'll log in. Okay, that's okay. So failed to execute set item on storage. 2 arguments required, but only 1 was passed. So this is in our auth context JS auth context. So let's go there and check this out on line 26. Here we go. Set item is logged in, so we should be passing in 2 things. So let's go back to where we had this and see how the setting of the item, we need to pass in something else here. So where were we doing this initially? I'm just going to search for local storage and check it out if it wasn't removed. So we are in our auth context, and we also have this in our app.js. So we just pass in the value that we want to set it to, which in this case is true. So or 1. So we also just need to pass that in when we're setting it. So let's pass that in and save and reload and try and log in again and see if once we pass in the correct value, the state itself, or the name of the state and the value, now it should be okay. So, or which is just true. So now we've logged in, super, and we can log back out. So that's great, 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 great. And we've done this now all through use context. So that's super. Cool. So now we're just looking at a little bit of slides. Like Max has just gone through some general slides here, and he's talking about the limitations of context. So I'll just have a little listen, and then I'll report back in a second on what he says the limitations of using this is, because he said you might think you should just use this everywhere, but in fact you should not. So I just was thinking my mouth felt weird but it's okay. Okay, so we use props for configuration, and we use context for state management across the app. So that's one thing he said. I'm still listening here. Okay, so React Context is not optimized for high frequency changes. So if you're constantly changing things, use state is better. If there's multiple changes per second, you shouldn't be using React Context. So later on, if there is changes that you need to track the state of on a second by second basis, there's lots of changes going on, then there's a better tool, and we're going to go through that in subsequent parts of the course, so stay tuned. And for now, we'll just keep on listening. So yes, so we can use context to replace state management across the app, where we are using use state if it's not high frequency changes. But if you're just passing it up to a parent, then use state is the better approach. That's what that was designed for. So do use both tools where it applies. So use state should be used if you're just passing something from child to parent, or parent to child, and then the or back up from child to parent, and then the use context can be used to pass it like further around the app, and in fact they don't need to be like directly related. You can just pass it from over here to over here. So yeah, they're used if you want to move things like more around for components that aren't directly linked. Yeah, so we've learnt about a good few hooks now. So Max just said he's going to be going through like all the hooks, but the hooks that we've learned so far now, if we've learned use state, which we did already know about, we've been learning about that this whole course, and I really do understand that so much better now, which is fantastic. Use reducer, use effect, and use context. So we're really getting through the hooks here. It's great. So all the hooks start with the first name of use. That's a hook. And you can only use one of these hooks within a React function. So within the actual component declaration, see the way they're in here? This is the only place you can use them. You can also create your own hooks, have custom hooks. So we'll also be looking at that. Okay, yeah, so see, so in here within the actual component declaration, so this is the component declaration for the login file, and this is the actual like component declaration for the login file. Whereas if we were to try and use hook up here outside of that in a standalone function, you can't use it up here, and my IDE should give me an error, but maybe it won't. Yeah, maybe it won't, he said, but you can't use it up here anyway. Okay, so here we go. React use state is called in a function that is neither a React function component nor a React custom React hook function. Did I say that right? So yeah, so it needs to be called within a React function component, and React component names must start with an uppercase letter, which is the case, which is the case here for login. So that's what's going on. We can only call the hooks within a component like this or within our own if we're making our own hook. So we'll just remove that. I just wanted to show you that error. Cool. So still just listening to the advice here on hooks. Yeah, so you can call it again in a nested function. It has to be at the top level within that function declaration. So here we have our function declaration for this component, our component declaration for the login component, and here's use effect. And you couldn't go and use another hook within this hook or like at a second level. It should be like this use effect is, like standalone within the function declaration. That's how you use them. Ow. So again, here we should get an error saying ba-da-da. So here we get an error again saying that React hook use context cannot be called inside of a callback. It must be called in a React function component or a custom React hook function. So that's all good. That's exactly what I was just trying to explain there, that here we're trying to use it inside of a callback, so this is within something, but it must be called in a React function component. So just at the top level of the React function component, the login component itself, that's how you use all the hooks. Only call them at the top level. Okay. Okay. So here another rule that you should really follow with use effect. How was that going on then? Okay, I'll just keep listening because yeah. Yeah. So Max did say that within use effect we have another use effect. Okay. Now, so he did say within the use effect that we shouldn't be using things from outside of this use effect. Like this should be a self-contained function basically, you know. So you shouldn't be using things from the greater component outside of the component. It should be scoped to its own stuff in here, you know. I hope that makes sense. But then when I had a look, like we are using something from outside. We're using this is valid on the email reduce state. So I just had to keep listening, like, because what he was telling us not to do, I have an example of where it is being done, but now he's just continuing to explain why this is okay, and then I'll fill you in. Okay. Okay, so it's allowed to be part of the surrounding component state. Sorry, it just can't be passed in from a different component, or at least it's highly advised that you don't use things passed in from other components, I think. You need to add them as a dependency, right? And you need to add that if you are going to use them, you need to add them as a dependency. Okay. Here. So you just need to pass it in as a dependency, I think was the main point of all that, what he was trying to say. It has to be passed as a dependency if you're going to use something. So if I remove that, he got an error. So and save. Cancel. So yeah, so it tells us here. I don't know. Okay. So I'm going to just continue. He's moved on, so I'm moving on. Okay, so just listening here. So in our UI folder now, we're going to create an input component. And then we want an input component, so new file. And we just set up our component as we always do, which is import React from React. And then we declare our function definition. So we have our const input and our arrow function, which is going to accept some props. And then you can include or disclude the brackets. So then we have props, and we're going to excuse me, return for the moment just nothing, and I'll export default input, the name of our component, and we will continue. Okay, so the JSX that should be returned here is coming from our login component. So if we go to our login component, we're just separating out concerns here and go down to our what we're returning. We want to return this whole div. So a handy little tool for this is you can just collapse this and it'll just collapse it all. So just let me make sure I'm grabbing the right information here. Yep. So we want our div, and I presume, oh no, I was incorrect. So I was presuming it was like all of the things at this level, but we just want this top div, so we'll cut this, cut, and then we can paste this into our return in our input here. So paste, and we also want to add an input.module.css file because we're going to add some associated CSS and use it with the object and create a name for the module import that we want to use. So say styles, for example, so we can then use an object styles dot and access all the different classes in our CSS file, as we've been doing throughout the later parts of this course. So we want a new file, and we're going to call this input.module.css. So cool. And now we're going to get this code from somewhere, I presume. Yeah. And we can just import this so we can use it. So import classes, we can just call this whatever we want, classes, styles, from input module dot module. Okay, and I think we need .css as well. So let me just check. Yeah, we do .css. So down in our input module, we will, or no, in our input.js, we will import, and we need the .css as well. And then we will get our CSS that we want, which is just coming from the login module, because that's where we got that same code from. So we just want to copy all of our control stuff over. Except for the actions. And we also want the media query. So now we have all that set up. That's great. So I'll just actually move that back. So now we have all that set up, and now what we need to do is just update our input module, our input.js, excuse me, to actually pass back in this data that we're using from outside. So here we have our props, and we should be using stuff in here. So these things should have given me an error, because we no longer have them in this component. So we're calling for things that we no longer have. So I'll actually just try and upgrade or update my Visual Studio Code by just going and checking if there's any updated versions of this, because surely this should know that we don't have this right now and give me an error. So that's what we're going to continue with tomorrow. And because we've reached our hour, I'm delighted to say I was all over the shop today with the internet and this and that, and but great, we got through our hour. We have our hour of studying done, and we have progressed some more. So fantastic. And tomorrow we're going to continue this extraction of concerns and pass in this data that we need in our input component. So thanks so much for joining me, Lilly Code, and I will see you tomorrow. Have a wonderful evening, everyone, and get a nice sleep. I'll be going off to bed soon enough. It's really early. I'm a little lazy bug, but I'm looking forward to my bed today now. So I hope you are too, and have a nice sleep, and chat to you soon, or have a nice day if it's the morning where you are. So thank you and goodbye.